2.3 Fatigue and Recovery by George Smith. When we exercise, fatigue is inevitable. In this presentation, I'm going to explain how we fatigue, how we can control fatigue, and what our body does to recover. The graph shows the fatigue index of everyone in my class from the Wingate test at Brighton University. The test involved cycling for 30 seconds maximally. The highest and lowest power output was recorded, and the difference between the two was the fatigue index. The higher the line up the y-axis, the larger the fatigue the person experienced. For instance, Charlie White achieved the highest amount of fatigue, which was 81. This was because his peak power output was very large compared to his lowest recorded. Charlie White is a footballer, and he is strong but small. He is fast, so he has lots of fast glycolytic fibers, which could be the reason why he fatigues so much. Compared to George Smith, Charlie White recorded a higher peak output. George's fatigue index was 51, which was a lot lower. This could have been because he is a distance swimmer, so he have more slow oxidative fibers than Charlie, and these muscles take longer to fatigue. We fatigue differently according to the type of exercise we are doing. During exercise that has a very high intensity for a short period of time, such as javelin, we are using our ATP energy system because we are using a short burst of energy for 3 seconds. Fatigue will not happen from a single throw because our ATP system supplies us with 3 seconds of energy, but if an athlete throws the javelin lots of times over during a training session, then their muscles will begin to fatigue because their ATP system cannot replenish itself without rest. This is anaerobic exercise, which uses ATP stored in the muscle as its energy source. During exercise that lasts 10 seconds, such as a 100-meter sprint, the athlete uses ATP-PC system, which produces lots of power, but if they continued at that intensity, their body would fatigue dramatically. This is anaerobic exercise, which uses phosphocreatine as its energy source. During high intensity and longer duration activities, such as the 400 and 800 meters running or 200 and 400 meters swimming, the athlete will be using their lactic acid system. This system gives you a lot of power for a longer period of time, but has the waste product lactic acid, which accumulates until it causes severe fatigue. This system is on the border of aerobic and anaerobic exercise, and it uses glycogen as its energy source, but it sometimes splits it without using oxygen, which makes it anaerobic. If you go out too quickly in a 400-meter swimming race, you will begin to start working anaerobically too early, and you will fatigue before you get to the end of the race. You need to swim fast at a steady pace at the top of your aerobic range, and sprint anaerobically at the end to achieve a PB. During very long but not as intense events such as a marathon or a 1500-meter swim, the athlete will be working hard aerobically, using their glycogen stores, splitting it using oxygen. In a 1500-meter swim, you aim to work at the very top of your aerobic capacity. If you cross over into anaerobic respiration, you fatigue and are forced to slow down. Going out too quickly can ruin your race because once you're working anaerobically, you cannot recover because you're using your phosphocreatine stores, which need time to replenish. Depletion of energy sources, creatine phosphate, and muscle and liver glycogen. ATP, ATP-PC, and the lactic acid systems produce energy for a short distance and high-intensity events. ATP is energy that is found in the muscle, and the ATP system is used for very quick and very high-intensity activities such as shot put, one rep max, or diving off the blocks in swimming. ATP is used for the first 3 seconds of exercise. After the ATP has been used up, the PC system then takes over. The molecule phosphocreatine is used to resynthesize ATP. The PC system lasts from 3 to 10 seconds depending on how anaerobically fit the athlete is. For instance, an untrained athlete might have lower phosphocreatine stores than an athlete who trains every day for sprint events. Because the trained athlete has larger stores, they can use their ATP PC system for longer than an untrained athlete. The difference between the two won't be huge, about 1 or 2 seconds worth, but over a 200-meter sprint, 1 or 2 seconds will make a big difference because they will be able to put off using their lactic acid system for longer. They want to stay in their ATP PC system for as long as possible because it doesn't produce any harmful byproducts. Once you start using your lactic acid system, your body produces waste products such as lactate, which accumulates and causes fatigue, which affects sporting performance. In the body, we have stores which are full of phosphocreatine, and the way we use these stores is affected by the type of muscle fibers we have. If an athlete has lots of fast glycolytic fibers, then they will deplete their stores more quickly than an athlete who has lots of slow oxidative fibers. For instance, if a shot putter did a lactate threshold test, then they will deplete their stores a lot faster than if a marathon runner did the same test. People who have fast glycolytic fibers are better at sprints, and people with slow oxidative fibers are better at distance events. Bogdanis et al. 1995 said that phosphocreatine levels can be completely depleted after high intensity and repetition exercise. For instance, when a swimmer is doing a 50-meter sprint, they are working at a very high intensity, so they might have used all their phosphocreatine stores by the end of the race. In order to combat creatine depletion, phosphocreatine can be consumed in natural sources such as meat, fish, and nuts, and the liver and kidneys create it. However, athletes can also take special creatine supplements which replenish stores and allow the athlete to perform to their best. Creatine that is taken by supplements is mainly used for sports that require short, powerful bursts such as weightlifting and bodybuilding. There are side effects of taking the supplement, such as stomachache and diarrhea. Also, your body can stop internally producing creatine if it gets used to having the supplement very often. The aerobic energy system uses glycogen, which is found in the muscle and produced by the liver. The aerobic energy system is used for longer distance events such as the 10 kilometers in swimming or marathon running or distance cycling. In the body, glycogen is the stored form of carbohydrate. It is broken down by the enzyme glycogen phosphorylase to produce glucose. Glucose is only used for aerobic exercise such as marathon running. During the race, the stores of glycogen which are found in the liver will become depleted and the blood glucose levels will decline. When the athlete's stores of glycogen are very low, they will hit the wall because they have run out of their main source of fuel, glycogen, and they have to resort to using fat, which is slower and more complex to use. In the graph, you can see that the runner hits the wall at 22 miles when their pace per mile suddenly jumps up from 7 minutes and 45 seconds to 8 minutes and 50 seconds because they have run out of glycogen stores. If they had gone up more slowly, at say 7 minutes 50, and held this pace for the entire race, then they would have got a better time. The body would have worked less hard and the glycogen stores would have depleted more slowly. This graph shows how glycogen stores in the muscle deplete over 3 hours of low intensity exercise from 100% down to 20%. If an athlete runs out of glycogen, they will experience hyperglycemia, where they will experience extreme fatigue and they might feel dizzy, have hallucinations, or collapse. Gluconeogenesis is when the body is so desperate for energy it breaks down muscle tissue or fat and converts it into glucose energy. This can lead to muscle atrophy, where you experience a loss of muscle mass. To prevent this from happening, a runner can carb load before a race and top up carbs during the race. To do this, you cut down your carbohydrate intake from 6 days until 3 days before your race. Your body realizes that its glycogen stores have gone down. So when you start consuming carbohydrate 3 days before the race, your body replenishes its stores and tops them up with extra. This is why you see cyclists in the Tour de France eating energy gels as they ride. They are topping up their carbohydrate and glycogen levels. Elite runners train their bodies to use a combination of glycogen and fat as fuel, so they never fully deplete their glycogen stores. This is called glycogen sparing. Muscle glycogen availability is also important for high-intensity intermittent exercise, such as matches or netball. Effects of waste products: carbon dioxide, blood lactate accumulation and acidity, heat. When we produce energy, we produce waste products, and these waste products can make us fatigue. When we begin to exercise, we produce CO2 as a waste product of respiration. Once the CO2 has been created in the muscles, it dissolves into the capillaries where 23% is carried by carboaminohemoglobin, 70% by carbonic acid, and 3% by blood plasma. From there it travels in the blood vessels to the lungs, where it will be expired. Carbonic acid is the main carrier of carbon dioxide, and it is made up of bicarbonate and hydrogen. As exercise becomes more intense, we produce more carbon dioxide in our muscles because they are working harder. This causes the acidity in the blood to increase because there are more hydrogen ions being created, and this causes the pH to decrease, which makes us feel fatigued. We need to breathe faster and harder, and this also makes us feel fatigued. When I fatigue during a 1500-meter swim, my muscles ache and I am breathing as fast as I can to expel CO2. If I could breathe faster, I would be able to work harder for longer, but there is a limit to how fast you can breathe, which means that there is a limit to how much CO2 you can expire. Another main cause of fatigue is lactic acid, which is produced in the muscle sarcoplasm of the cells. In the muscle sarcoplasm, anaerobic glycolysis takes place, which is the splitting of glycogen without using oxygen. Anaerobic glycolysis begins with glycogen being broken down by glycogen phosphorylase, which produces glucose. The glucose is then broken down by phosphofructokinase to produce pyruvic acid. If there's not enough oxygen, then the body begins to produce the waste product, lactic acid, because the enzyme lactate dehydrogenase breaks down pyruvic acid. If there is enough oxygen, then the body will begin to use the Krebs cycle. For anaerobic glycolysis, the process uses 2 ATP and creates 4 ATP, so the net gain is 2 ATP. The lactic acid energy system is important in exercise because it uses carbohydrates to make energy, and it fuels the production of glycogen and glucose by the liver. However, a buildup of lactate causes severe fatigue. This buildup in lactic acid is called lactate accumulation, which is where the levels of lactic acid increase to 4 millimoles. Once there, they then rapidly increase. In the graph, we can see that the lactate threshold occurs at 2 millimoles, but as the exercise gets more intense, the lactate levels go up to 4 millimoles, where OBLA, onset blood lactate accumulation, kicks in. OBLA is where the levels of lactate rapidly increase. Our lactate threshold is the maximum rate at which we can exercise before we start to experience a build-up of lactic acid. By increasing this threshold, we can improve our sporting performance. The acid in lactic acid is hydrogen ions. The hydrogen ions interfere with electrical signals in the muscles, slow down energy reactions, and stop muscle contractions from working effectively. Over a long period of time, and a certain intensity of exercise, lactic acid builds up and causes fatigue in the muscles, and this can affect performance. When I am doing a 1500-meter swim, lots of hydrogen ions have been produced in my blood, and my muscles begin to ache and shorten, which interferes with the length of my stroke and fluency of movement. My swimming becomes jerky and inefficient, and I feel incredibly tired. Then my muscles begin to burn, and it is difficult to swim. To stop this from happening, I train 16 hours a week at different intensities to help my body adapt to using the lactic acid system.